All right, so Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, our president that will see us through the dark years of the Civil War, the bloodiest war in American history. More people will die in this war, more Americans will die in this war than Americans will die in World War II, World War One, or any of the major wars that came after it. It's killed more Americans than any other war. Um, and it split us in two. It forced, in some cases, family member against family member. Um, it forced American against American, people from different states fighting for different reasons, for their belief in slavery or their belief against slavery, for their belief in states' rights or for their belief in the Union. But it was not a good time in this country, and it required solid and firm leadership, which Abraham Lincoln is known to have provided. Um, he is routinely seen as one of the best, if not the best, president in our nation's history. Now that's up for discussion, for argument, but he's consistently ranked up there, and for good reason. What he was able to do in one of the toughest, if not the toughest time in our nation's history was nothing short of remarkable. So who was he? Well, we don't. Um, I mean, there's certainly a lot of information about him, but he was also a private individual. We see him today as, again, one of the greatest presidents of our nation's history. We see him all over the place. He is on our money, on the $5 bill, on the penny, even though pennies aren't widely used anymore. He has his own monument in Washington, D.C., a grand statue that is very, very famous. It's the site of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He did it outside of the Lincoln um, Memorial in Washington, D.C. It's there, right there in the National Mall, along with the Capitol building and in the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument, that's just an obelisk. He doesn't get his own statue like Lincoln does and a few other presidents do. Um, and there's four presidents we've selected up on Mount Rushmore. Lincoln is one of those presidents. There's George Washington, our first president, Thomas Jefferson, and Theodore Roosevelt, who you'll learn about next year. But Lincoln's up there too. He's the guy right there on the far right of the screen or of the monument, and it just goes to show you that he is so revered in our nation's history, in monuments on money, that so many different stories and legends have been passed on about this man. So while we do have historical fact, we know a lot about his adult life. We know a lot about what he would do as president. Um, and we do have some facts about his childhood, but nonetheless, there's going to be stories that come up. You know about George Washington um, and his stories that came up, chopping down the cherry tree, never telling a lie. Um, those are myths. Those are just stories to try to build his character. Lincoln is going to be like that. Um, More so than any other president except for George Washington, Lincoln is revered as almost like a saint-like figure in American history, as the ideal president. Him and Washington both hold that distinction. Washington was our first, the guy that led us through the Revolutionary War. Lincoln's the guy that led us through the Civil War. And these guys are going to be national heroes um, for all time. You may have some criticism about how they ran things or their personal views, but the accomplishments and the times that they saw this country through will endear them to us forever. So these guys are going to be around. Now, our goal for today is try to figure out who Lincoln was and how his childhood and early life shaped him and made him the man he was going into the Civil War. That's how did he become this leader that everybody could look up to and everyone could follow, and people would listen to, and how could he figure out how to end this war, how to what would become his goal, how to end slavery, and fix the wounds of the nation, and fix these problems that have plagued the nation since its founding. Well, here's what we do know about Abraham Lincoln. We do know that he was born in a log cabin. You may have heard that before, out in Kentucky, which was then the frontier. Many presidents had claimed to be born in a log cabin before him. It made them seem like a common man. William Henry Harrison, who was a famous general in the War of 1812 and became president after Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson, he claimed he was born in a log cabin. He ran on it in his campaign. Hard cider in a log cabin. Yet he was a rich plantation owner from Virginia. He was not born in a log cabin. Abraham Lincoln was. He was actually a common man, born not very wealthy to a family out on the frontier who had a hard life growing up. There wasn't an easy life living on the frontier, trying to be a farmer out in what was then the West, and what was Kentucky. Abraham Lincoln and his family would move a lot. They would live in Indiana and Illinois as well. In Illinois, the story goes, is where he first saw a slave market, even though Illinois was not a slave state and Kentucky was. And that turned him against slavery forever. Again, that's the story. No verified fact, but it's widely spread. Another story about Abraham Lincoln was that he taught himself to read. He didn't have any formal schooling, or at least very little of it. Some people say that it was actually his mother who taught him to read. Some people say that his mother couldn't read herself. Either way, she did die when he was very young. So he did have a close relationship with his mother, but she was taken from him very early. And he had to, in a way, raise himself until his father remarried. And his stepmother, he actually got along with very well. But he had a big family, and he took care of them as well and stepped up when the troubles happened. Later, when he did grow up, he became a self-made man. So he opened up his own store. He studied law, became a lawyer. He became a state politician in Illinois, and later actually ran for Congress. So he was in Washington before he was president for a very brief time, just after the Mexican War in the late 1840s. But he was a self-made man, came from very humble origins, and was very intelligent. He loved to read. The origin of his learning to read still up for a little bit dispute, but we do know these things about Lincoln. All right, and you'll watch the videos, you'll learn a little bit more, but you also start to think about, as you're watching the videos, what was true and what wasn't true. All right, so we do know a whole lot about him. We do know some facts about his childhood, but there is inevitably some myths and some stories that will come up about him that are unverifiable. One thing we do know is true is that he is not a vampire hunter. That was a movie about 8 years ago or so, but entertaining, not true, just for fun. But I want you guys today to go back and to write your own origin story for Abraham Lincoln. And I'll explain how I want you to do that. We'll look at the create an origin story directions here in a second. 3 videos you'll watch after this, they're all YouTube videos. There's links here. Longest one's about 6 minutes. This is an overview of his childhood, a little more information than I've given. Next two, we'll try to interpret his childhood in different ways. This one will say that he had a hard childhood and that he faced adversity, and you learn from that, and that influenced who he would become. This one kind of gives him a almost a religious and mythological origin story that they would say would go on to influence his actions later on. So what's true, what's not true, it's up for debate, but I want you to create your own. Once you've watched a couple of those videos and get a little bit more background on him, make your own story. So if we look here at the directions for the story, and bring that over so you can see it, we want to tell a story, or a myth even, about who Abraham Lincoln was, where he came from, and how that changed his events. So I'll read through the directions here, try to explain as I go. Write a origin or story or myth about Lincoln's childhood, you must include some sort of life-changing event within your story that would influence Lincoln to go on and try to become a politician and a president, or it can be about how he came to be against slavery. In other words, there needs to be a lesson or a moral to your story that Lincoln will learn and how it will change him. So include some real things in this. Okay, he's out on the frontier. He lives in Kentucky, or maybe he's in Indiana or Illinois at that time. Talk about who his parents were. You'll learn in the video or things like that. Include real people, but feel free to add your own twist to it. Be creative. Definitely a work of fiction that you're creating here. So give us a background, all right? Create your own origin story for Lincoln. When you write about 300 words, which would be about a page if you type it out in Times New Roman 12 font, double space, then that will be about a page. Again, you don't have to finish it all today. I'll make it due Friday. You may have some time to work on it the other days of the week. I know I plan on making Thursday's lessons a little bit shorter just to accommodate some of the longer ones. I think we'll have on Wednesday a long lesson too. So be creative. If you have questions, come to office hours about this assignment or any other assignments that you may still be working on. Let me know. But follow directions. Write an interesting story about who Lincoln is and where he came from, because Americans cannot get enough of Lincoln and they want to hear your story. All right, come to office hours if you have any questions. Have a great day, everybody.